Welcome to the For Her Empire podcast. I'm your host, Abby Welcher. And in this podcast, we address the personal and the business issues that female entrepreneurs face in their day-to-day lives. My guest today is the lovely Deborah Olatunji. Hi, Deborah.
Hey, Abby, how are you?
Hi. So Deborah is a writer, an award-winning poet. She's also an activist, a public speaker, and the author of the book, Unleashing Your Innovative Genius, High School Redesigned. And today's podcast is a bit interesting because we're going to address one of the more societal issues here. So we're going to talk about how to navigate activism and education. I got that right so far, right? Yeah. Okay. So just introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you.
Yes, of course. So first, I'd love to say thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. I'm coming to you guys from the state of Delaware in the United States. And one of the biggest words that I use to define the impact that I make in terms of my book, the different ventures that I've started, and the organizations that I'm a part of is my core value. And that is in being an igniter. That just means that I see myself as an unstoppable creator who works together to bring communities together, to listen to each other, to work together, to really collaborate and empower themselves in their individual ventures and community ventures to create something that is better than what currently exists. And so that may mean disrupting the current system or completely reimagining it, like the education system.
Oh, you want to redesign the entire education system?
Oh, for sure. I've seen that there are so many different ways that we can navigate through it in a much better method that will actually enrich students beyond the memorization and the constant anxiety over testing and being perfect. And so I think that that's one of the many ways that we can start to see a shift in the education system. So students are so much more open to loving it and liking learning and then wanting to be in a community where they can share their ideas without being judged.
Okay. So what ideas do you have about how to really change the educational system? Because admittedly, the educational system is based less on what you know and more what you can cram before the exam starts. And it's not like the questions, they actually test your knowledge anyway. They just test what you read in the book word for word. So how are you going to change it?
I think one of the ways to combat memorization and that strategy of students having to cram topics and knowledge before exams is to just encourage people to be critical thinkers instead and to focus on why things are happening instead of just filling in responses for answers. And then introducing experiential learning to the classroom where students get to be at the forefront of their learning experiences as opposed to just having a teacher guide them every single time. I do agree that there's definitely a place for a teacher, but in our current education system, it's one where they give all the commands and they give all the directions for students as opposed to letting them really guide their own process and discover how they really like to learn.
Yeah, so I did not imagine that overhauling an educational system would be easy or that there'll be zero resistance. So how can we slowly implement this? So what's the way forward?
One of the biggest ways forward is through the curriculum. I think that it may seem daunting at first, but it's honestly the most compatible way in this 2020 to start, chipping away at the current system that we have. And one of the biggest examples of that is in how people are with the time that's going on right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, protesting the systemic racism, people are taking down statues. But as an education activist, we're trying to push that idea further by saying we need to also take them from our history books and reframe the narrative and tell students who they really were, because our history books are incredibly whitewashed. They don't tell the full story, and tearing down monuments is great. It's fine. We should have been doing that in the past. It shouldn't have been created in the first place. But we also have to look at the history books and see what narrative is being told about how they played a part in history and all the stories that haven't been told because of the way how whitewashed our curriculum is.
Yeah. So now that part about the monument and changing that narrative in the book, because there's this saying that winners write history. So and given that America is on its own a very white centric, so to speak, and they tend to pretty much control everything. So when we say let's remove this monuments from the history book and let's actually tell that you were racists, that you actually kept slaves, you violated so many human rights, and the things you did were incredibly awful. For some section of the citizens in the country, they might feel like their culture is being stripped away. So now, how would you address that?
I think it starts by addressing the history that's been told to them that tells them that that's their culture. I think what you're pointing at is the idea of Southern pride. And even when we're
Oh yeah,
talking
that
about the
one.
Confederate flag, the Confederate flag that they put on their trucks and everything, that Confederate section was only around for 3 years. So they can't really say that that's a part of their culture and their history when it wasn't even a prominent part of American history. And then another point to that argument is, why would you want to stand behind something that represents racism and hate and just prejudice and all this torture? Like, why would you want to be behind something that is actively, hurting people who live today? And it's just the argument that they try to give back is that, oh, it's my Southern pride, it's my Southern pride. Like, if it was Southern pride, then it would be humility. It wouldn't be about tearing people down and trying to prove yourself to someone as some macho personality. It wouldn't be trying to bring your guns in here and trying to, hurt people. And so whenever people say that the monuments and all that are a part of their culture, I'm like, then you need to redefine what culture means to you, because that culture that you claim as your own means that you see Black people as degenerate human beings and that you see them as people who are less than. And that's not the America that we should be living in right now.
Yeah. So now I have two questions. Now the first part is let's start with willful ignorance, the part in which people of a more privileged race in America, typically the whites, do not, and I'm putting this in quotes, see racism. Like, and then until that video of George Floyd went out, many people did not really believe that racism was an actual issue in America. And which is interesting because that's not the first video to ever go out. It's just and that's not even the first video where Black lives have literally died in the hands of police. But it just felt like the more visceral, because for minutes you literally watch someone's life drain out of them. So you have to like, this, I cannot see racism, or I did not see the difference. You have to like wonder, like, so that people who still think that this is an isolated incident, or who think that this whole thing was like just pushed out of, sort of like you're making it more dramatic than it really is. People who do not see race, like what's the solution to this, making them actually see that no, this is like a day-to-day thing. This happens.
I tell them to just look at their communities, because that's one of the biggest places that you can start to see systemic racism. For example, with the term gentrification, when white investors bring in bigger companies like Whole Foods or Acme, or just a market that is mainly based for white citizens into a neighborhood, bringing the prices up for the housing for, African Americans, Black people, Latinx people who can't afford that, that is just the continued prevalence of gentrification and racism. And so when you are pushing these lower income families out of these neighborhoods by raising the prices, you're telling them you have to go find somewhere else to live. And in most cases, when we look at those communities that they end up living in, they don't have the best food markets. They're usually living in food deserts where there isn't access to fresh vegetables and fruits and whatnot. And there's probably higher rates of crime because, there's kind of this mentality in this community where you have to just survive. And, Americans are always saying, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But how do you pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you don't have boots to begin with? That's commonly the conversations that we're having in terms of access and equity and resources. When you are actively taking away things that benefit a community, and then you try to claim that racism is an isolated incident, it's almost like you're living two different lives. You're thinking these with two different minds, but not seeing that you're the problem. And so that system is not just perpetuated in the environment and our communities, it's also in healthcare. The Black mothers are four times more likely to die in childbirth than white mothers. And, that just comes in terms of the disparities that happen with the medical practices that exist, the different textbooks that they're learning from, and even with the ideas that they're telling med students where apparently if you have more melanin, if you're Black, that your skin is tougher. That's absolute nonsense. But it's something that they're teaching their med students in their classrooms so that when Black patients come in, they misdiagnose them and they tell them, you're completely fine. But then if that Black patient goes to somebody who looks like them, who goes to a Black doctor, they'll maybe find like a carotid artery or a blood clot, and that other doctor just decided to overlook it. And so it's not just an isolated incident at all. It continues to happen on a daily basis, whether that's racial profiling with the police being killed at the mercy of it and being recorded and memified over and over and over again until we have to convince people that these injustices are happening. And then it's also in our workplaces, because, if you even look at the the big banks in America, even the big executive companies, how many of them are Black? How many executives do you have that actually have Black equity that own that in these companies? That's just another continuation of racism. If we don't even have the generational wealth to show that we are, quote unquote, moving forward and progressing, you can't say that racism is an isolated incident.
Okay, that makes sense. So now let's bring this to the educational system. I don't know if it was this year or last year, in which a Black student was bullied. I don't know if it was this year or last year, maybe the year before. But then the teacher, when the Black student actually fought back, or I guess defended themselves, but what was in the article said fought back anyway. The teacher punished the Black student and not the actual and not the bullies. I mean, yes, you fought in class, so I guess both of you are to a degree responsible for actually fighting in class. But then teachers tend to put the blame on the colored person. And then, which is interesting, because by doing that, the other students are sort of having this idea that this person is always the bad guy. This person is always at fault. My actions, I am not responsible for them. They pushed me to this. They did this. So how is the education system, one, contributing to causing more racial issues, and two, solving the racial issues if possible? How is education really helping out with this?
So right now, education isn't helping out with solving these issues because, to your first question, one of the biggest problems in terms of discipline issues and determining who gets the punishment is that there's actually statistics specifically for my state, and there's ones for all the others, but for Delaware specifically, Black girls are 4 times more likely to be disciplined severely, whether that's being suspended, being expelled, being sent to the principal's office, than white girls. And in most cases, they try to normalize Black misbehavior as the behavior. And that becomes a very big problem in terms of education, because instead of, teaching kids how they should be doing things and not disciplining them with suspensions, they're missing days of school. And so they're not getting that enrichment. They're spending more times outside of school, thinking to themselves, what is the real purpose of this institution if it's not seeing me as someone who is equal, where I can't even see myself in the history books because only the white stories matter. And then as we continue to go through in education, you just get this continuous message that, you're less than, or that you don't matter. What does that say to the students who are, quote unquote, acting out? And then the disciplinary actions that they decide to take are just completely out of proportion, and they don't actually work towards bettering the students. Instead, they actually work towards punishing them and showing them who has the power. I think that's one of the most hurtful things that education is continuing to do. And I went to a middle school that was predominantly Black and Latino, and that's what you saw. There were so many more fights in this institution because, there wasn't as many disciplinary procedures that were actually working. There were so many more suspensions, so many more expulsions. But then when you look at who's really behaving and how they're responding to the behaviors that you decide to, the punishments that you decide to give them, in most cases, it's not the suspensions and it's not the expulsions that help them to grow and learn. It's them sitting down and examining, thinking for themselves, what did I do wrong? How can I do better? What steps can I take to, show that I'm truly sorry, that I've truly learned from what I'm doing? And how can I move forward in my education having learned from this experience? Those are not the conversations that people are having, but they need to happen so that students understand that even though I may have done something wrong, even though I may have done something that was incredibly immature, I'm still a human that is growing and learning and making mistakes. And that's something that shouldn't be treated so heinously.
So like what you just explained now about this of just giving out suspension and giving out expulsions and sometimes actually really being dragged roughly, which I would just call physical assault, honestly. So most once again, I'm not in America, so my information is solely based on the news, on videos and articles I see. So I might be wrong in this, and the justification, that's really a really wrong word to use here, but the rationale behind that really aggressive treatment is that they respond better to this, that we have to be more aggressive with our punishment. We have to because apparently we are more violent and we respond more to violent tactics. So what's your response to that?
I think that if you even look at how you're supposed to handle having difficult conversations, in most cases, someone's going to respond so much better with them if you're gentle, if you're understanding, if you come from a place of wanting to listen and learn rather than wanting to instigate, confrontation and feelings of hatred. And that's the same kind of approach that we could take towards creating these quote punishments or really places for people to learn so that they can move forward. And I think that if you take a much harsher approach towards, these offenses, it's not going to make students think, oh, I should never do this again. It's going to agitate them and think, well, that's unfair. I shouldn't have gotten such a harsh thing. I'm going to show them that. And, it's just this continuous cycle of them trying to prove themselves because the system has long told them, these are the punishments that you get. We don't really care if you move forward. We don't care if you get better. We're just trying to put you in a box in this place so you don't disrupt the learning processes of other students. And that should never be the focus, especially if we're trying to create a sense of community between students, because that means you are trying to create accountability as well. Because if a student is being, punished for something and the punishment does fit the crime, where they're, asked to be really, really thoughtful and to think about what they've done, then when they come back into society, it's almost like with the prison system that we're trying to, completely redesign. When they come back into the classroom, they have a sense of, this is what I did wrong. This is what I need to do to contribute to the social contract of the classroom. And this is how I can move forward in the future. And then those classmates who saw the problem that went down and saw the punishment, they'll see them and they'll want to embrace them back into the classroom because they see that they've learned from what they did, but they don't want them to be punished for that for the rest of their educational career, because that will just stifle their learning and not encourage them to continue to wonder and to understand that, yes, you will make mistakes, but there is a way to learn from them.
Yes. I honestly think the expulsion thing, it has to be a quite severe issue for you to actively strip someone's education from them. If it's and most of the time it's just like ridiculous thing, like you standing up for yourself from a bully and then you just somehow get expelled and your education is taken away from you, and then you can't really apply to another school because that is quite literally on your record. So that doesn't really help anyone. And so I like that you talked about, overhauling educational system and talking about starting by changing the curriculum. But now the punishment system, as we overhaul in the educational system, where does this, at what point does this change come in?
I think in terms of the curriculum and then in terms of the punishment, how those two converge is in the policies and the kind of ideas and the social contracts that set forth by the students and the classmates and the teachers from day one. I think that if you are creating a classroom culture that is focused on people growing together and people learning together and people trying to enrich themselves as a whole, then you'll have less of those instances where you have to do punishments that involve, the real reflection or going towards, just taking moments to think about what you've done. Because if you create a culture where people are benefiting from a social contract, then they're less likely to want to do things that could lead to expulsion or want to lead to suspension or just a confrontation in general. When you create a platform and a space where students feel that their voices are heard and not one over the other based on the color of your skin or based off of what's in the curriculum, then you create a real full circle, education where people understand that my voice does matter, it does have its importance, and this is a place and platform where it can be shared without judgment.
Okay. So now this next question, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it, since it's more of a more the more legal political side of things. So it was like, what exactly would it take to actually implement this change curriculum? I guess for private school that could be easily implemented, I guess, since it's private owned. But for a federal school, for a change in curriculum, which there will be lots of people against it, especially those who are privileged, because there's this thing that if you're privileged, then equality all of a sudden seems like you're being punished. So now, by changing this curriculum, those who have been privileged from this would feel like they're being put down. So there will obviously be a lot of resistance for a sort of change. But what would it take in an ideal world for this to be implemented?
I think that we can draw examples from one of the biggest superpowers in education, and that is Finland. They actually took a move this year towards taking away all of their subjects, and I can imagine that they were met with a lot of pushback, but they're trying to move towards performance-based learning. And so I think in America, I don't know if we'd ever do something so drastic all at once. If we wanted to work towards the tiny, it's honestly, that's
true. I mean, look at your current president.
But if we want to work towards if we want to work towards the building block of getting real progress, it would have to take legislation in all of the different states, and then getting a Secretary of Education who's actually focused on student outcomes as opposed to just filling her pocket. Because let's face it, Betsy DeVos is not in there for the right reasons.
I forgot about her now.
Oh God. I am so excited to welcome the next Secretary of Education. I actually am working on writing a letter to the new one, but she is not focused on student outcomes at all, and that goes in terms to all the other secretaries of education of all the different states, because she's setting a precedent for herself. She's showing, other secretaries of education what she cares about. And that's why we keep seeing education being put on the back burner in terms of the budgets being slashed and funds being taken away. But if we get real legislation towards having students have the choice, of deciding what gets into the curriculum, what we're actually teaching them, then you'll have not just more motivation from the students, but also the teachers, because they'll be able to be flexible with their students and create that community culture that I was talking about before.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit. We're going into like some pretty heavy stuff so far. So let's dial it down a bit. Let's talk about your book a bit. Yeah. So what exactly inspired you to write about basically about innovation, I guess? What really did you just like wake up one day and like educational system reform? Like, what pushed this?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest motivations for me in terms of writing the book was there were quite a few life experiences that I went through to begin with. There wasn't just one isolated incident that just made me wake up one morning and think, education needs to completely change. But I think one of the earliest things that I can point to was actually the shirt that I'm wearing. I went to this design sprint for this organization called Dual School, and the whole entire focus was creating a kind of like a second school where people would go to in the middle of their school day to just spend 3 hours focused on whatever they were interested in. And to me, that idea was really intriguing because I'd never been given the autonomy beyond 30 minutes to really do something that I cared about beyond, doing homework, doing schoolwork, stuff like that. And so when we were working towards ideating this, we really just went into this process of mock mentors. And so it was just an adult figure who sat with you, who talked to you what problems you were interested in solving. And so the person who I sat with, her name was Maggie. And I actually talk about this story at the end of my book because it's a chapter on how to find a mentor. And I think that this experience really just completely shaped my approach to this problem. And so what I sat down with her to talk about was what I really felt was wrong with not just education, but in life in general. She was like, what is a problem that you're currently facing right now that you want to solve, that you're really invested in finding a solution towards? And to me, I really just talked to her for, I think, 15 minutes straight about the problem with my math class. Because for me, I was a freshman that time. I didn't hate math, but the math teacher that I had was focused on teaching math in one way. And I was just like, this can't be the only way to learn math, And a lot of students weren't having successful outcomes. It was math that I had learned before in middle school. I don't know what it's called in Kenya, but it was just before I got to high school. That was the math that I was dealing with. And so I thought to myself, this shouldn't be difficult. I just did it last year, but she would just make the curriculum and the test in a way where even if you wanted to ask the question, you didn't know what the question was to ask because she wasn't open to really teaching us beyond that. So we couldn't even ponder on how to be better because we just simply weren't taught on how. And so as a frustrated 15-year-old in that system, I thought to myself, this really is tough. And I don't know if I can move forward with an education system that tells me that this is the only way to learn math. And then I experienced it again, sophomore year with biology. The biology teacher really made me realize, and that it wasn't just him, it was the class and the choices that he decided to make in terms of not building a community culture. I realized that for the next 2 years, I didn't want to just sit in classes and worry about tests and quizzes, that I really wanted to have something that I was benefiting from my education and getting real values from. Yes. And so that was when I started to supplement my education because my STEM-based high school wasn't going to give me the topics that I needed to really be interested in. They weren't going to teach me the Black history that I truly cared about and wanted to discover and explore. And they certainly weren't going to encourage me to do experiential learning. And so I really found those places to supplement my learning experience from the outside. But in redesigning the education system, I really push and focus on creating these resources and providing these pathways for students to do that during school hours so that it's so much more enriching and fun. And they don't have the feeling that I felt when I was in school thinking, I just have to get all this homework done and all this stuff for my regular school. And then I get to focus on the things that I'm actually passionate about during my downtime. And so that was something that was a real shift for me because I realized that the education system that I was battling with was very remote and very robotic, and there was no sense of life in it. And it was ironic because biology is a study of life, but it was dead. And so I realized that I felt revived and I felt really, alive when I was doing things that were experiential and focusing on the things that really woke me up and gave me, hope for my education.
Yeah. Okay. So, how many high school students actually think the same way you do? I don't imagine somebody just goes biology, math. Yep. Overhaul the entire system. So have you met other sort of high school students who can relate and they're all for let's change this right now? Have you met others like you?
Oh, for sure. I think that's the most comforting thing for me has been realizing that I'm not the sole person in front of this. And I don't think that there should ever be a sole person in front
Mm-hmm.
of a movement to make such a big change. And so it has been so comforting to find that there are other people who are education activists as well, who think this way, who want to improve education, who want to completely redesign it. And we've ultimately created a community where we can talk about different ways that our states can move forward with legislation, like I was talking about earlier, and ultimately how to change the cultures in our existing classrooms so that people feel like they're welcome and they can come to these spaces and really share their ideas and be heard.
So, and what about students who do not see anything wrong with the current educational system, either because they are used to it or it sort of favors them? So, it might seem like you're speaking like a completely different language that they don't understand. When you're talking about, the system should be this way and this is more better, and then they're like, what's wrong with this one? So how do you like connect with them, because technically you do
Yeah.
need to convince them for this change to be implemented?
So in order for us to encourage people that change actually needs to happen, we have to show them that there's a problem with the existing system. And so if they can't see that there's a problem with their education system, they're not going to want to make changes because to
Yeah.
them, there's nothing to be improved. And
Yeah.
so the first step, honestly, for us is exposing the problems that exist. And it's not hard because there's so many to choose from. But once we show them those problems, that's just the truth. Once we
Oh.
show them those problems, they start to understand, this is horrible. Like my education experience could be so much better than what it is right now. And I want to work towards actually getting an education system and an education experience that benefits me and then also benefits maybe my siblings or my different neighbors and cousins that are coming after me, so that when they're talking about what they're going through with education, they're solving a completely new problem that we haven't even heard of because we've taken the time to tackle the ones that currently exist.
Okay, so now I understand how you would address the students. But let's go about how you would address the teachers who were also taught the same way, who also sees this as the norm, as this is the way to teach. So now how do you tell them that you could be teaching them in a different way, or you could teach others in a different way without making it look like you're telling them how to do their jobs, because that would just annoy them anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. I think the most refreshing part of teachers in general, and I've had some really good teachers. I don't want to say the experiences that I had with my math and biology teacher just completely ruined it for me. That's not true. I definitely had a lot of really inspiring and enriching teachers that showed me that they also agreed that education needs to change. And you can usually tell by the teachers who've been in the practice for a couple of years. And so one of the closest teachers that I have is my AP biology teacher, and she taught me scientific research as well. So that was a class where we really actually learned how to think. She didn't focus on grades because she just decided to pass everyone. And I think that the benefit with that was people stopped caring about their grades because they knew that there was no reason to worry about it. And they actually focused on, what was being taught in scientific research. And some people may look down on that method and say, well, you just gave everyone an A, but it was a half credit course. Everyone had to take it. It was weighted by the same of a basic class. And so it wasn't that big of a deal. The whole point that she was trying to get across to us was that I don't care about your grades. I don't care about the number that you put on paper. I care about what's in your brain. I care about what's in here, what you're thinking about, how you're processing the information that I'm giving you. And so teachers like that, they really understand that there's a need for there to be a change. But then the newer teachers, those are the ones who usually come in with the most light, and they want to make a difference to begin with. That's usually why they go into teaching. But I feel like they don't get the experience just yet until they start teaching of what changes need to be made. And so those are the teachers that I often find myself needing to convince. And when they hear it from a student's perspective, it's entirely different. There's almost like a magic that comes to it when you're talking to someone who is, experiencing the education exactly. They actually start to listen. And so I come to them from a place of understanding and warmth and wanting to relay, my opinions on how we can make a difference and how we can change the existing system and actually, make an effort to solve the problems that exist. And that's where they're usually the most receptive, when they're hearing it from a place of, I'm not here to attack you. I'm here to tell you what problems exist so we can work together to solve them. And these are the ways that we can do that.
Okay, so now I got curious about your teacher that gave everyone a pass. Wouldn't that mean that there were some who were lazy and were like, I'm gonna pass anyway? Wouldn't that sort of like bring in like laziness into the classroom?
Yeah, for sure. There was definitely laziness even in that class, but the whole entire message that she was trying to get across, and I think that this should be more of a push in every factor of every class, regardless of the level. I think she was trying to say to us, this is your education. and you decide how you're going to run it. If you want to be lazy, if you don't want to put in the work, you're the one who's going to have to deal with the consequences of that. I'm not the one who has to deal with the consequences of it. I'm here to give you the knowledge and the information that you need and create a platform where you can really explore the ideas that you're really passionate about or the interests that you are curious about. But if you're just going to sit there, be a bump on a log and do nothing, you're the one who's really getting the detrimental side of it. Because at the end of the day, the grades and the numbers don't matter. What you get out of the education system, what you get from the value system, the conversations that you've had, and the different values that you've been able to take out of it, those are the things that really matter.
Okay. So now, what's your advice for other high schoolers? Let's say, okay, so the education system there and here is a bit different. So I think you guys call those in their first year freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, after freshman, it's what? What's the second year called?
Sophomores.
Okay, and the third year is called
juniors.
I'm guessing the seniors next,
and then seniors. Seniors.
Okay, so what's your advice for like high school freshmen who are getting into high school for the first time? They've probably had just a shitty middle school education, the teacher literally not teaching you but telling you. So now you're going to come to high school and deal with that same stuff, but like on a harder level. So what's your advice for them?
So I think the biggest advice for high school freshmen that I could give is throw out all of the ideas that people have told you about high school because they're wrong in most cases, and you have to explore this journey for yourself. And I think that my book can serve as a really good guide, but for the most part, when you're a freshman, the biggest thing you should be focusing on is exploration. Exploring your ideologies, your friends' ideologies, your parents' ideologies. What ideas have been crafted around you that make you think a certain way, and why do you think that way? So I think that if they're in an environment where the content is harder, where the teachers are maybe a little bit more difficult than middle school, that's a matter of mindset shift. There's a new flexibility that comes into that. And they have to start thinking why they have to learn these things and to what purpose, to what extent does this add value to their lives.
Okay. So I'll ask a question, but before I ask it, are you still in high school?
No, I just graduated. So I'm a rising freshman now in college. Thank you.
Okay. Now I have two questions. And this is coming from a point of deep ignorance. Please bear with me. Once again, I'm not American. I've never been there. And given the way things are going, I don't want to be there. So the way high schools are portrayed in movies and series and actual high school, are they the same?
No. Not at all.
There's not like hallway with some like bell ringing and everybody like forming like tiny cliques, and some cafeteria where you're sitting down like in a box in a table and your friends are like, oh my God, Jenna. Like, that's not there.
I mean, we still have like hallways and bells and different social groups, but it's not as dramatic as the movies make them out to be.
I feel disappointed right now. Disappointed right now. And the cafeteria food is terrible as it looks like in movies.
Oh yes, it's terrible all around. That is a true fact. It's not good at all.
At least I know something. And then people like throw parties every single Friday. Like, oh my God, I have a party this Friday. Like, my parents are not home. Like, did that happen all the time?
I think that there's still party culture for sure, but it's not as serious as maybe college, because I think that that's what college is notorious for, a lot of parties. And if people are partying in high school, they have to, budget all the time that they're spending studying for standardized testing exams, doing sports. And so partying definitely exists in high school, but it's not, there isn't as much pressure to go to a high school party than probably in college.
Have you been to college yet? Or are you going to start after this whole COVID thing is over?
Yeah, I'm starting in August.
Oh, okay. I guess after you start, I get to ask you if college looks like it is in movies.
Yeah.
I want to know about this whole sorority thing. It seems quite pointless from my end. It's like, what do you need this for? So I want to know, like, why and why does it exist? What benefit do you get out of it? And like this whole chuck. That's actually there.
Oh. I think I'm not planning on joining a sorority because I'm personally a little bit terrified of Greek life. I think it's very cultish. And my family doesn't like it either, so I don't intend on, getting that Greek-like experience. But from what I've seen, there's a lot of peer pressure. They really push like sisterhood and brotherhood, and it's just another social club that people want to be a part of.
Oh, once again, movies have disappointed me. Like, my expectations for this reality was so down there. Disappointed right now. And what other portrayal of high school life and college life on TV would you say is like false?
I think everybody goes into high school thinking that they're going to have like a high school musical experience where people are singing in the hallways and teachers are just like, you don't have to turn in your homework. Go to the basketball game, stuff like that. And that's not true at all.
Okay.
I mean, for the most part, teachers are not, there are some teachers who are laid back and more understanding, but no one's going to tell you to not do your homework. You know, if anything, high school is where people are going to push you the most, that, you know, homework is important, and it definitely is. It has its purpose. But in high school movies, they're just like, it's almost as if work doesn't exist. And
yeah, it's like, oh my God, I forgot my assignment. He wouldn't care. And since we're on the topic of like American movies, well, I guess for you it's just movies since you are in America anyway. We work on American movies because I'm not there. And this ridiculous culture of students seducing their teacher for an assignment that actually exists, because it sounds like a sexual assault in the making, and it's like very unhealthy power dynamics going on in there.
Oh yeah, I definitely see that in almost every high school show there is. The students are always threatening the teachers, and it's usually in private school movies. So I don't think that it happens as prevalently in public school, because public school teachers don't make enough money to be threatened. And that's almost sad in a way, but the private school teachers, I think that's probably where they get more fear, because I went to a private school, but that was only from like kindergarten when I was really young, 5, to when I was 9 in the 4th grade. So I didn't really experience it when we were getting older, because I didn't go to private school anymore. But I imagine that mainly happens at private schools and not the public ones.
So it does to a degree perhaps exist. American movies have once again filled me. Wow. Like all the ideas I had in my head are like just flowing away. And since you're here, are cheerleaders an actual thing in high school?
Oh yeah, they're still cheerleaders. They're not as catty, but they're definitely cheerleaders in high schools. And I guess the cheer culture is different depending on which high school you go to. Mine was mainly STEM based, and our football team wasn't any good, and that really depends. That really makes or breaks how
first
your
of all,
cheerleading
if you're listening to this, she's sorry for saying that. You said they were not any good.
Yeah, I mean, for American football in particular, my high school football team was not. It wasn't it. And so the cheer team didn't have as much things to be excited about, because we weren't winning any games and people weren't attending. So there was no audience hype. There was no encouragement from anyone else besides themselves and the marching band.
Goodness, hella depressing.
Yeah. So it depends on the high school football team, honestly. And they're usually the sports team that gets the most funding, regardless of how good they are.
Oh, whoa, really?
Yeah.
Why? If you should say that, why are you getting funded?
That's the question we ask all the time. Usually it's the high school football teams, because the parents usually, it depends on the type of school also, but for my school, you had to take an exam and everything like that. So you really can't get into the school for football. And so maybe that's why the emphasis isn't as prevalent. But for the most part, high school football programs get the most money simply because they're the most popular, and maybe that's where the most potential they see is, and they don't want to invest in other sports. But I'm not a sports expert, so I don't want to come from a place of knowing everything, because I definitely don't. But that's just how it happened in my high school.
Okay. And do you personally like mentor other students, or you sort of connect them to other mentors?
Yeah, so that's a perfect question, because it really segues into the social venture that I started called the Student Leadership Initiative Program. And our sole focus, one of our biggest focuses, is peer mentorship. We focus on community building, helping students understand the professional skills, like how to be a great storyteller, public speaking, how to articulate and advocate for the things that they care about. And so with the Student Leadership Initiative, or SLIP for short, the slippers are the mentees. And we have this whole hierarchy of leadership where we have a senior advisory board, a junior mentor team, and then we have the underclassmen that are being mentored.
Okay. And in terms of like implement, is this already happening, or it's in the works?
So it's currently happening. We've been an organization for the past 2 years. We have a founding chapter in Delaware and then one in Tennessee that's going to start next year. And the really big goal is for 2023 to have a national, SLIP organization where there's a SLIP chapter, at least 3 SLIP chapters in every single state, and maybe even internationally as well.
Oh, okay. And apart from Maggie, is there anyone else who sort of like inspired you?
Yeah, I have a mentor right now. His name is Rich, and he's been
His
one of
name
the
is
biggest
Rich,
inspirations. Yes, Rich. I think it's short for Richard.
probably. Otherwise, that's a
Yeah.
weird name to have.
I think it's his nickname for the longer term of Richard. But Rich is what I call him. That's how I've gotten to know him. And he really helped me in terms of crafting my first keynote because I started my book tour in 2019 before my book even published in February of 2020. And I had no idea what I wanted my keynote to be about. You know, the school kind of reached out to me. They were like, we loved the article that was written about you, because there was one in the local newspaper from Delaware, and it ended up reaching someone in Philadelphia. And they were like, we want you to come to our school and give this presentation to our students. And I was absolutely gobsmacked. I was just like, I've never, spoken all by myself on a stage. I've been talking in choirs, I've been organizing events, but I've never had, just myself with my ideas beyond like poetry to talk about to students for half an hour. And so I was kind of scrambling. I was really worried, but I really just went to my mentor, Rich, and he really talked me through the process. He gave me really great ideas for what I should talk about, how to engage students. And I ended up talking about the failure story because I think for students, I didn't want them to see me as just another high school student who was better than them, who wrote a book. That was not the image that I wanted to portray. I wanted to meet them at their level and say to them, even though I've written this book, even though I may have made such a grand accomplishment that seems out of proportion for you, it's honestly the failure story that connects us all, because we all experience failure. We all go through moments that we don't think will happen, things that don't go as planned, but I tell them how I turned that failure into fortitude or grit, the perseverance, the real understanding of what the situation was, into ending up writing this book and not being defeated with the education experience that I've been given.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about your book in a minute, but a little question to that: are there any misconceptions people have about you, or maybe your classmates have about what you do?
I think a lot of people think that I spend all of my time working and that I don't have any moments of fun, and that I'm just a workaholic all the time.
Do you?
And I think a part of that is from my Nigerian background. So my family is Nigerian. I think being a workaholic is unfortunately like the culture, just grinding until you have no more steam left. And I have had moments like that where I don't, spend time to actually have fun. But I've realized in the past couple of years, especially in launching the book tour and meeting more people, expanding my network, that it's so incredibly important to have the self-care, to have moments where you're just having spontaneous FaceTime calls with your friends, to take the time to really, spend time as a teenager and not grow up too fast. And that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about me, that I have grown up too fast and that I don't have any fun. But I can assure you that I do.
Okay, first of all, my fellow Nigerian. What? Second of all, I guess, do you like come across as like this very serious, strict person? I mean, you've been smiling so fast, so who knows?
I think to my friends, no, because they've seen both sides of me. They've seen the professional side of me. They've seen the really spontaneous and playful side. And I think the biggest switch in terms of me for understanding how people perceive me was when I went to this summer camp for 2 weeks. It was at a university in Boston, and I didn't bring up the book at all. I didn't know how to, have that in a regular conversation with people I didn't know. And so we were on a transportation to get to an event. We were going to I happened to mention in passing that I'd written a book. And this was after I built a relationship. We talked about where we were from, the different cultures that we have in our states and whatnot. And the girl who was sitting next to me, I still remember, her name is Kelsey. She's one of my closest friends. She's like, wait a minute, you wrote a book? And she said it so loud that the entire bus started turning around. And I was just like, oh my God.
Why would you do that to me?
Because I didn't know how to talk about the fact that I had done something like that in a way that wasn't obnoxious, but she asked me the question and I answered it. And so I'm now learning how to navigate that, because being an author is a part of my identity, and it's not something that is, rude or prideful or anything, because the whole reason why I wrote the book was to empower people. It wasn't a book that was just about me or my autobiography or anything like that. It was a book that was supposed to add purpose and add value to people's lives. And so I'm becoming so much more comfortable with talking about it and using it in daily conversations with new people, but it's definitely not the first thing that I bring up. So I kind of create the presence of myself through like humor, relatability, talking about things that matter to me. And then I usually get into the advocacy side of it. And that's usually when the book ends up coming up.
Okay. Okay. So you just mentioned um, um how do your friends and your family sort of relate to you both on a personal level, on a professional level, so like that sort of balance? Because on one hand, Deborah is my friend or my daughter or my sister. On the other hand, Deborah is also professional. So like, how do they like navigate that's two different sides of you?
I think I'd love to call one of them onto the podcast and they can
Sure.
talk about this further. But the way that I think that they navigate that is by understanding that I am not my work. And I think that's something that I've had to tell myself a lot, that even though I've created this project, even though I've done different ventures, I've written this book, that I am not my book, but rather I am the experiences that I show to people or I exhibit through the different things that I've decided to spend my time on. And I think that's a really humbling thing for myself as well, because I realize that your self-value and your self-worth isn't found in your accomplishments, but rather in the relationships that you build with other people. And so honestly, I think they see me as somebody who is really carefree, down to earth, who is driven, who wants to get things done, and then also wants to bring people together with her and not just be the sole person who is driving the momentum for the change that I want to see.
I also hope they see you the same way too. Yeah. So where you said your book came out in February this year. So where can somebody get a copy of the book? Is it a physical? I've seen you hold a physical copy. Is there an ebook version as well, or like how can someone actually get the book?
Yeah, so you can get the book, the physical version or the ebook version, and I'm working on the audiobook version this summer, so that'll be out soon. But you can get that on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart. It's not in local bookstores yet because of the current pandemic that's going on, but you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on my website, www.deboraholatunji.com, and that'll lead you directly to how to purchase it and a couple of articles about me. So you can get it from my personal website, you can get it from Amazon, you can get it from Barnes and Noble, you can get it online.
Yeah. So just say the name of the book again.
Yes. So the title of the book is Unleashing Your Innovative Genius, High School Redesigned.
Okay, so Unleashing Your Innovative Genius, High School Redesign. And you've also mentioned your website, DeborahOlatunji.com. That's how people can get the book and I guess connect with you or work with you, or like ideally.
Yes,
like,
they can also collaborate.
Yeah, or collaborate, that's the word I'm looking for. So they can get the book and collaborate with you. Okay. Is there any question I should have asked or something you want to talk about that I've not asked?
I guess we could get deeper into the book and what the contents are. I'd love to talk further on that.
Okay, sure.
So I think one of the biggest questions that I usually get concerning the book is who the book is for. And so I wrote this book thinking about time and space, and that just means that I wanted to realize how relevant it was for me as a student, writing about the high school experience as someone who was going through it, and then talking to that with students who are currently in education or who are now in college and are reflecting on what they needed from their education experience. And so one of the biggest representation things that I wanted to present was not only that I'm a Black woman writing this book, but also a high school student. Because if you look at the array of books in the education space, there are hardly any written by students. And that really baffled me because I thought to myself, we're trying to solve a problem and create an education system that works for the consumers of it, and the consumers of it are the students. So essentially, we are the customers of this business transaction, and education very much has become a business if you think about it. And they're not even asking the customers what we like. And so I decided to put that all down in here, not just my perspectives, but the ideas of senators, college students, entrepreneurs, activists, high school students, of course, and college students, to really articulate what an education system that is redesigned looks like from a student's perspective and from people who can initiate real change. And so the book is broken into 3 different parts. Part 1 is how to conquer in the classroom. Part 2 is how to retrain your mind. And then part 3 is how to utilize the outside world. And each and every single chapter has a call to action that you can take towards your life, because I realized that the education system that I am advocating for is one that is extremely action-oriented. And so I wanted to give my readers ways that they can improve their education experience and make those changes true to their lives right now.
So apart from the student reading the book, would you recommend it to teachers as well, or would they be offended by the content?
Oh, no, I think that even I had a teacher, one of my biggest proofreaders was a teacher, my AP Lang teacher. And I think teachers would definitely benefit from this book because, like I said, they're the ones who are serving students. And so hearing the perspective exactly from a student and from students all across the country would benefit them a lot because they would learn different ways that they can, make their classroom more accessible, more of a safe space for people to share their ideas and values. And then they would also understand, how can I make this experience better for my students on an individual level rather than the collective level that my teaching may have taught me to do. And so it teaches teachers, it surprisingly teaches teachers how to be better at their profession because it's directly from a student who has experienced so many different experiences with teachers and wants to help them grow.
Oh, okay. And I've seen from what you're saying that the dedication was a bit different since most people like dedicate it to their family or in my case to myself. so who did you dedicate yours to?
I dedicated the book to my little sister, so I can read that right now.
Sure,
the dedication page is for my little sister testimony, who showed me why education has changed, and my future children for whom I pray the system will be different. And one of the biggest motivations that I had in writing this book was understanding that the education system that I'm writing about in this book will hopefully look entirely different 5 years from now. And maybe this will be like in the history museum or something. I don't know. But we can just continue to refer back to the solutions that I bring up in the book to solve the current problems and maybe even solve the new ones, because I wrote it from a stance of, I don't want my future kids to say to me the same things that I had complaints about. I don't want them to be talking about how their pop quizzes didn't go well or the biology teacher was only one-sided. I don't want those to be the stories that they tell me. Instead, I want them to come to me with brand new problems that I haven't even thought of, so that we can work towards continuing to make a system better for the new learners that come into the classroom.
Oh, nice. Wow. I was about to mention that your biology and math teacher, like you don't want your sister and future kids to have somebody like them in their classroom and making them feel like this is the only way to learn something. This is my way or my way. There's no other option for you to learn this. It's also interesting because I actually love biology. So sorry about that. I love biology. The idea of like dissecting a frog, I was like, yes, love it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just like all your frustrations and all that anger. There's a frog in front of me. Put it in there.
Okay.
I know, like the worst anger management ever, but it worked.
Makes me a little bit squeamy, but.
Oh my god! You want to talk a bit more about your book, or you just want people to get more details about the book on the website, which is DeborahOlatunji.com. Is there a blurb or what's it called? A sample, a preview?
I mean, if you have any other questions, I can definitely.
I don't know. I can't think of anything right now. So it's like anything else you want to say, that works.
Yeah, I can read a chapter, not a whole chapter, but I can read a section of chapter 7, Hack Homework, Creating Independent Studies. And I'll just read the first page of it, page 95 if you're following along. So the quote that opens this chapter is, "Do your homework and know your facts, but remember that it's passion that persuades." And that's a quote from H. Jackson Brown Jr. And then I continue in my own words. "Students across the United States mindlessly spend hours in a stone-cold building. Some end up leading in a state like the rigid, unoriginal, and bleak place. In most cases, you do have the desire to learn, but because of the infinite list of curriculum requirements, you may never dig deeper into the subject material. In order to redesign the purpose of school to revolutionize and embody the elements of a 21st century learner, you need 3 things: independence, determination, and exposure."
Oh yeah, it's quite surprising that if you're doing this for like roughly a year or less than, give or take, since the book went out in February. But yeah, you're great at this. Where can we see your poems? You mentioned that you're a poet.
Yeah, so the poems are actually in the book because I think they were really big guiding forces in terms of me understanding my voice and understanding my stance on a lot of issues. So I have 3 poems in the book. I am colorblind, and "To be woman is to be human," but you can also find videos of them on my Instagram or on the internet, as well as on my website.
Okay, and what's your Instagram? Let me follow you right now.
At Deb_Olatunji.
Deb_Olatunji. Oh, as a Nigerian right now, how is the Nigerian culture in Delaware?
I think I remember we celebrate Independence Day, and that's around October, but I haven't met many Nigerians in Delaware. There's a really prominent group on my campus that is called Nigerians at the School, and so I'm really excited to be immersed in that because honestly, I've been around a couple of Nigerians, but I don't think there may be like 2 Nigerians in my high school out of 1,000 people, so it isn't really prominent in Delaware.
That's you?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
How far is Delaware from Philadelphia? I know my cousin is in Philly.
I think it's around an hour.
Too much effort. I had initially planned on going to Wilmington University, but then I was like, nah, I don't wanna. And then your president's changed. I was like, hell nah. Back away, Satan. Like that. Oh, so this was a fun interview. It was nice talking to you.
It was great speaking with you. I
proud
really
of you,
enjoyed this
dude.
conversation. Thank you.
By the way, do your parents like still give you chores to do since technically you're like a professional, an adult, so to speak? You still do chores?
Oh yes, most definitely. I still have to take out the trash, wash the bathroom, do the dishes. I definitely still have chores.
Wow. My ultimate goal was that if I was still a parent, that whenever I'm told to do chores, you know how most Nigerian parents keep like referencing that I'm feeding you, I'm clothing you, I'm paying the bills.
Yeah.
I'll be like, I also contribute to the bills. That's like my ultimate goal to like snap back to that. That never happened since I just left the country. So like,
oh no.
Would you recommend that to a Nigerian parent?
No, I would not. I would not recommend that to any Nigerian kids. Don't do it. You could definitely work on building your net worth, but don't say that to your parents.
No. Like the best part of being successful is that, excuse me, I paid the power bill last week. Goals. Oh my God, it was fun talking to you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm very excited that hopefully we'll continue to stay connected and maybe have another conversation in the future.
Yeah, when you go to college, let me know. So you can have one about the college experience, so I can put that and then what I've watched in the movie and see how is that matching up.
For sure.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.